Ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you a question right now. If you look around in this world, how many people do you know who are working hard every single day, yet they are still broke? How many people do you know who wake up early, go to work, put in the hours, and when the month ends, they are still wondering how to pay their bills? See, the truth is this: it's not hard work alone that makes you wealthy. If hard work made you rich, construction workers would be millionaires, janitors would be billionaires, and every single person with a double shift would have financial freedom. But they don't. And the reason is simple. Most people stay broke because they never learn how money really works. People have been told since childhood, if you work hard, you'll succeed. If you put in the hours, you'll get ahead. And while discipline and diligence are necessary, let me give you the truth that most people don't want to hear. Hard work by itself will never make you rich. If that were true, then construction workers would be living in mansions. Single mothers working double shifts would be financially free. And janitors who clean buildings at midnight would have millions sitting in their bank accounts. The reality is, the world is full of hardworking people who are still broke. And the reason is simple: because hard work without the right knowledge, without leverage, without financial intelligence, only produces exhaustion, not wealth. Here's the hook you need to grab right now. Success is not about how many hours you put in, it's about how much value you create in those hours. Wealth does not flow to the hardest worker in the room. It flows to the person who understands how to multiply value. You can break your back working 12 hours a day for 40 years, but if you never learn how to make money while you sleep, you'll wake up every morning working for money instead of letting money work for you. Think about it. A farmer who works the field from sunrise to sunset without ever planting seeds in fertile ground will still come home with empty hands. It's not the sweat alone that brings the harvest. It's the wisdom to plant in the right place, at the right time, with the right method. Most people are sowing sweat, but not sowing strategy. They're busy, but they're not productive. They're working hard, but they're not working smart. And that is why they stay broke. The truth is, wealth is not a reward for effort. It's a reward for effectiveness. Wealth shows up when you find ways to solve bigger problems for more people. The janitor works hard, but he solves a small problem for a few people, so he earns little. The entrepreneur works smart, builds systems, and solves problems for thousands, sometimes millions, and that's why money flows to him. The broke person says, I can't work any harder. The wealthy person says, how can I increase my impact? That's the difference between labor and leverage. Let me challenge you with this. If you only trade your time for money, you will always run out of both. Time is limited, but value is unlimited. When you learn how to create value that multiplies, you step into a different dimension of wealth. This is why authors write one book and earn royalties for decades. This is why inventors create one product and get paid again and again. This is why investors put their money into assets that keep producing returns long after the initial work is done. They understand that wealth is created not by effort alone, but by systems, by multiplication, by leverage. So don't buy the lie that hard work guarantees wealth. Hard work without wisdom is wasted energy. Hard work without direction is like running on a treadmill. You're moving, you're sweating, but you're not going anywhere. The key is not just to work harder. The key is to work smarter, to think differently, to find leverage, to create value that outlives your effort. Because until you do that, no matter how hard you work, you'll stay stuck in the cycle of survival instead of stepping into the abundance you were created for. Most people believe that making more money is the answer to their financial problems, but the truth is this: it's not how much you make, it's how you manage what you make. The average person spends every dollar they earn, and when their income goes up, their spending rises right along with it. They get a raise, they upgrade their car. They get a bonus, they take a trip, they start making more money, they move into a bigger house with a bigger mortgage. And at the end of the month, nothing has changed except the size of their bills. That's why most people stay broke no matter how much they earn, because they confuse income with wealth. Income feeds your lifestyle, investment builds your freedom. Here's the hook you need to hold on to: money grows when you plant it, not when you eat the seed. The wealthy understand that every dollar is a soldier that can go out and bring back more dollars if it's invested wisely. But the broke mindset sees money as something to consume, not something to cultivate. That's why poor people buy things to look rich, while rich people buy things that make them richer. One invests in assets that put money in their pocket. The other spends on liabilities that take money out of their pocket. And as long as you keep feeding your wants instead of building your wealth, you will always be a consumer in a system designed to keep you broke. Think about this: if you plant one apple seed, it has the potential to grow into a tree that produces apples for years. But if you eat that seed, you've gained a moment of satisfaction and lost a lifetime of provision. Most people are eating their financial seeds every single day. They buy the latest phone, the designer clothes, the fancy gadgets, not realizing that those dollars could have been planted into something that multiplies. The wealthy resist the temptation of short-term gratification because they're focused on long-term transformation. They ask, how can I make this money work for me? While the broke ask, what can I spend this on? That one question determines their entire financial destiny. Now let me make it plain. The difference between spending and investing is not just about money, it's about mindset. Spending answers a desire, investing answers a destiny. Spending gives you comfort today, investing gives you freedom tomorrow. When you spend, the money leaves and never comes back. When you invest, the money leaves, but it comes back multiplied, bringing friends with it. That's the power of seeing money not as paper, but as potential. Here's the final hook you need to grab. If you don't learn how to make your money work, you will always have to work for your money. And as long as you're the only one in your household producing income, you will always be one paycheck away from disaster. But when your money starts working, when your investments begin producing, when your dollars become soldiers fighting for your financial freedom, that's when wealth becomes inevitable. Because the wealthy don't just earn more, they build systems, they multiply, they invest. And that one choice separates those who live in bondage to money from those who command it with authority. Most people think poverty is simply not having enough money, but that's not the root of it. Poverty is not an empty wallet, it's an empty vision. Because here's the truth: money follows vision. If you can't see beyond where you are, you'll never reach where you could be. The reason so many people stay broke is because they're too busy surviving today to even dream about tomorrow. They're living paycheck to paycheck, bill to bill, problem to problem, and they've been trained by the system to settle for survival instead of reaching for abundance. The lack of vision is what keeps people trapped, not just the lack of cash. Here's the hook: wealth doesn't begin in your bank account, it begins in your mind. If your vision is small, your life will stay small. If your vision is limited, your opportunities will be limited. When you can't see yourself living beyond survival, you won't take the steps that lead to freedom. That's why the wealthy think differently. They see possibilities where others see problems. They look at opportunities that most people overlook. They don't just ask, how do I pay this bill? They ask, how do I build something that pays me for life? And that shift begins not with money in your hands, but with vision in your heart. Think about it. A person without vision is like a driver without a destination. You can put gas in the car. You can start the engine. You can even drive for hours. But if you don't know where you're going, all your energy is wasted. In the same way, you can work long hours. You can put in effort every day, but if you don't have a vision for where that effort is leading, you'll wake up years later in the exact same place. That's why poverty is not about the absence of resources, it's about the absence of direction. Most people are trapped in the cycle of earn, spend, repeat, because their vision doesn't extend beyond the weekend. They work for Friday night, they live for a vacation, they plan for retirement at 65, hoping they'll have just enough to survive. That's not vision. That's not vision. That's limitation. Vision says, I can create something today that blesses generations tomorrow. Vision says, I can build a legacy that outlives my paycheck. Vision says, I am not stuck where I am because I see where I can be. Without that picture in your mind, you'll never take bold action in your life. Here's another hook you need to grab. When your vision expands, your provision expands. Money is attracted to clarity. Investors follow vision. Opportunities follow vision. People will support you when you know exactly where you're going. But when you're uncertain, when you're confused, when you're only focused on what you lack, doors stay shut. The moment you start painting a bigger picture for your life, the resources to fulfill it start showing up. So don't say you're broke because you don't have money. The truth is you're broke because you don't have a vision big enough to attract the money. If you can't see yourself free, you'll never be free. If you can't see yourself wealthy, you'll never become wealthy. But the moment you shift from survival thinking to visionary thinking, everything begins to change. Because money is temporary, but vision is eternal, and vision is what creates the wealth that money alone never will. Most people live their entire lives chained to a paycheck. They wake up every morning, clock in, work all day, and at the end of 2 weeks or a month, they receive a paycheck that covers their bills, maybe gives them a little extra to spend, and then the cycle starts all over again. That paycheck gives them survival, but it never gives them freedom. The system was designed this way. Jobs were created not to make people wealthy, but to keep them working. A paycheck is like oxygen. It keeps you alive, but it doesn't give you room to breathe, dream, or expand. That's why so many people spend 40 years of their life working hard only to retire broke, tired, and still dependent on some form of income just to get by. Here's the hook you need to hold on to. If you only work for a paycheck, you will always be a prisoner of someone else's system, because a paycheck has a ceiling, but assets don't. A paycheck can only give you what your employer decides your time is worth, but assets can multiply beyond time and effort. That's why the wealthy focus on building assets, while the average person focuses on chasing paychecks. The wealthy ask, what can I own that produces income? While the broke ask, where can I work to earn income? That's the mindset shift that changes everything. Think about this. An asset is anything that puts money in your pocket, whether you show up or not. Real estate that pays you rent is an asset. A business system that works without you is an asset. Investments that yield dividends are assets. Books, music, or intellectual property that pay royalties are assets. Assets don't care if you're asleep, on vacation, or taking time with your family, they keep working, they keep producing, they keep paying. And that's the difference between survival and freedom. Survival says, I need to work to get paid. Freedom says, my money is working harder than I ever could. The tragedy is most people never even think about assets because they've been trained to depend on a paycheck. They've been conditioned to believe that security comes from a job. But let me tell you the truth, a job is not security. A job is a contract where someone else controls your income. True security comes from ownership, from building something that outlasts your labor. As long as you're trading time for money, you're limited. But when you build assets, you step into multiplication. Here's the final hook you need to grab: a paycheck keeps you alive, but assets set you free. If you don't learn to create assets, you'll work until the day you die. But the moment you start shifting your focus from what you earn to what you own, everything changes. Because paychecks give you a living, but assets give you a life. And until you understand that difference, you'll stay stuck in survival mode instead of stepping into true financial freedom. One of the biggest reasons people stay broke is because they're trapped in cost-based thinking instead of value-based thinking. The broke mindset always asks, how much does it cost? While the wealthy mindset asks, how much does it return? And that single difference in perspective determines whether you remain in lack or step into abundance. Cost-based thinking is about fear. It's about what you lose. Value-based thinking is about vision. It's about what you gain. And until you shift from focusing on the price tag to focusing on the potential, you will never build wealth. Here's the hook. The broke person sees every dollar as an expense. The wealthy person sees every dollar as an investment. That's why someone with a broke mindset looks at a book and says, I can't spend $20 on that. But the wealthy mindset says, if this book gives me one idea that makes me $2,000, that's the best return I could ever get. The broke mindset looks at mentorship and says, that program costs too much. The wealthy mindset says, if this mentorship can shave years off my learning curve and help me build a business that generates millions, that's priceless. Cost-based thinking keeps you small. Value-based thinking expands your future. Think about it. If a farmer looks at a bag of seed and only sees the cost, he'll never plant anything. But if he looks at that seed and sees the harvest, he won't hesitate to sow it. That's the exact difference between broke and wealthy thinking. The broke say, I can't afford to lose this seed. The wealthy say, I can't afford not to plant it. The broke cling to money because they don't trust its ability to grow. The wealthy release money to opportunities because they understand its potential to multiply. The real tragedy is this cost-based thinking robs people of opportunities every single day. They pass on investments because they're afraid of losing. They reject education because they don't want to pay the price. They skip mentorship because they think it's too expensive. And in doing so, they guarantee their own poverty. The wealthy know that the only real cost is staying the same. They know the cost of ignorance is always greater than the price of learning. They know the cost of missed opportunity is always higher than the risk of investment. Here's another hook you need to grab. Poor people ask, how much will it take from me? Wealthy people ask, how much will it bring back to me? That's why the broke buy liabilities and call it luxury, while the wealthy buy assets and call it freedom. One is focused on spending, the other is focused on multiplying. And the multiplication always wins. So when you face an opportunity, stop asking only about the cost. Ask yourself about the value, the return, the multiplication. Because broke thinking will always keep you counting pennies while wealthy thinking will always keep you counting possibilities. And your mindset will always determine your money. There are people everywhere who are filled with information, but they're still broke. They've read the books, they've attended the seminars, they've watched the videos, but their life hasn't changed. Why? Because knowledge alone doesn't create transformation. It's not what you know that makes you wealthy, it's what you apply. Information without implementation is just entertainment. It makes you feel good in the moment. It gives you the illusion of progress, but it doesn't produce results. And results don't come from knowing, they come from doing. Here's the hook: information changes nothing until it becomes application. You can have a library full of wealth building books, but if you never execute the principles, you'll still be broke. You can sit in the front row of every motivational event, take notes, nod your head, shout amen. But if you go home and don't put the strategies into action, you're still in the same place. Knowledge is potential power, but it only becomes real power when you activate it. Think about it this way. If you go to the gym every day and watch other people lift weights, you might learn the right form, the best exercises, and the smartest routines. But until you pick up the weights yourself, your body will never change. The same is true financially. You can study wealth creation all day, but until you take the risk, make the investment, start the business, or build the asset, your financial situation will stay exactly the same. The gap between broke and wealthy isn't knowledge, it's execution. Most people stay broke not because they don't know enough, but because they don't do enough with what they know. They wait for the perfect time. They wait until they feel ready. They wait for conditions to be ideal. But waiting has never made anyone rich. Action does. Wealthy people act on imperfect knowledge. They adjust as they go, and they learn through doing. Broke people keep gathering information, convincing themselves they need just one more course, one more video, one more mentor before they start. That hesitation is what keeps them trapped. Here's another hook you need to grab. You don't fail because you don't know. You fail because you don't move. Motion beats meditation when it comes to money. You can think about it, pray about it, talk about it, but until you take the step, nothing changes. The wealthy understand that mistakes are part of the process. They know failure is feedback, not final. They use the knowledge they have, take action, and then learn from the results. That's how they keep growing. So the real key isn't learning more, it's doing more with what you already know. Because chances are you already know enough to change your life. You already know you should invest. You already know you should build assets. You already know you should manage your money differently. The problem isn't information. The problem is execution. And until you bridge that gap, knowledge without application will keep you broke, no matter how much you know.